It's a good feeling to take notes. So we're going to speak today on a passage that if you've been in the church before, pray it loads of times. It's Jesus and the woman at the well. So we're going to read it from John chapter 4, verses 1 to 42. But we're probably going to skip ahead at some part of it. So don't worry about it if you haven't got your Bible. It's quite a long passage, so just bear with us as we read it. But it's good to read these things, so we'll do that. So it starts with, now, when Jesus learned that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus was making and baptizing more disciples than John, although Jesus himself did not baptize, but only his disciples, he left Judea and departed again for Galilee. And he had to pass through Samaria. And so he came to a town of Samaria called Sychar, near the field that Jacob had given his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, so Jesus, wearied as he was from his journey, was sitting beside the well. It was about the 6th hour. A woman from Samaria came to draw water. Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink," for his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "How is it that you, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a woman of Samaria? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans." Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is that's saying to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." The woman said to him, "Sir, you've got nothing to draw water with, and the well's deep. Where do you get that living water? Are you greater than Jacob? He gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did his sons and his livestock." Jesus said to her, "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks the water that I give him will never be thirsty again. The water that I give him will become in him a spring of water welling up to eternal life." The woman said, "Sir, give me this water so I won't be thirsty or have to come here to draw water." Jesus said to her, "Go, call your husband and come here." The woman said, "I've got no husband." Jesus said to her, "You're right in saying you've got no husband, for you've had 5 husbands, and the one you have is not your husband. What you've said is true." The woman said to him, "Sir, I see you're a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, but you say that in Jerusalem is the place where people should worship." Jesus said to her, "Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, for salvation is from the Jews. But the hour is coming and is now here when the true worshippers will worship the Father in spirit and truth, for the Father is seeking such people to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth." The woman said to him, "I know the Messiah is coming. When he comes, he will tell us all things." Jesus said to her, "I who speak to you am he." Just then his disciples came back. They marveled that he was talking with a woman. But no one said, "What do you seek?" or "Why are you talking with her?" So the woman left the jar, went to the town and said to the people, "Come, see a man who told me all I ever did. Could this be the Christ?" And they all went out of the town and were coming to him. Okay, and we'll probably leave it there. In fact, I'm going to just jump ahead to one more verse, which is verse 39, which is that many Samaritans from that town believed in him because of the woman's testimony. "He told me everything that I ever did." So when the Samaritans came to him, they asked him to stay with them, and he stayed there 2 days, and many more believed because of his word. Okay, so that's Jesus and the woman at the well. Like I said, a really common story if you've been in church for years and years and years. I've probably heard a million sermons on that, particularly. And every time I kind of think about that story, I always think, and it's not a bad way to think of it, it's right. I always think about Jesus showing us that we need to go out to the people who are hurting and broken and who are a bit rejected and on the fringes. And that's right, there's nothing wrong with that. But just as I was kind of preparing this and thinking about this, I just felt God was saying to me, actually, just think about the way you come to me as a person and your story. You know, think about you've all, well, not I necessarily, but we all come in different ways. But some of us really relate more to this woman at the well than others. And as I thought about it a lot more, this kind of person who didn't quite get it at first, who had no real right to be speaking to Jesus, and then was brought into this kind of knowledge of him, and then this ultimately this relationship with him, and this knowledge that he was the truth. And then I started to really see myself in that position, rather than thinking, "Oh, we need to go out to the people who are hurting and broken and don't get it." I just really felt God was saying, "Yeah, but you're those people. You know, you are a person who doesn't always get it, and he's hurting and broken, and you still need to come back to me and relate to me in that way." And as we kind of deal with, try and get around, we'll come to the youth work here in a bit. But I'm just started to help out with the guys, like Jeff and Justin and Jill from here who do youth work. I've just started that on a Thursday and stuff. But one of the things that we find with young people is this kind of question that they often do. Certainly I find with teenage lads, this kind of desire to prove yourself. And just to think, am I good enough? If I can just be, funny enough or clever enough or witty enough or attractive enough or good at sport enough or whatever it is, if I can just be good enough, then therefore I'll be alright. People will accept me, I'll have a crowd in school or in college or whatever, and it'll be good. Okay? No one wants to kind of sit on the fringe, no one wants to be on the outside. And we're going to look at this kind of thing about fitting in and where do we fit and all this kind of stuff. Now I work in Liverpool as an accountancy lecturer, which is about as exciting as it sounds, I realise that. So I lecture accountants in Liverpool. Now Liverpool is a pretty football-mad city. So I go in there and I have this kind of one example of how to account for something very dull technically, but to get them interested I always kind of open up with how Steven Gerrard is worthless. And I guess the Red Scousers all up and all, like that. Steven Gerrard is worthless, and then I go on to say it's an accounting thing, and then I go on to say how rubbish loads of Liverpool players like Andy Carroll are, and you can see the Red Scousers getting really upset with me. And then all the Blue Scousers think, oh, he's one of us, he's an Evertonian. And then I joke about when Everton lose at home to Wigan. And so I made that joke as well, and then I've lost them all. And they're like, who are you? And so one guy, the first time, I've been working about 6 years now, the first time I was doing this kind of thing, some guy literally stood up in the middle of my class and was like, in the broadest Scouse accent, I was like, you don't know what you're doing here, mate. Coming here, slating our team. I was like, I'm going to get punched in an accountancy lecture. I wasn't expecting this. And I was like, mate, and I said the thing, you should obviously never say to an angry Scouse. I was like, mate, calm down. Oh, don't tell me to calm down. Oh, no, please don't hit me. I'm not made for fighting, I'm too squidgy. And so I thought I'm going to be in trouble. And so I clearly, when I go to work and we talk about football, I don't fit in, I'm not one of them, they know that, I'm a bit odd. So Jesus comes across this woman who doesn't fit in anywhere. He's in Samaria, which is this kind of area of within kind of Israel as we know it now, I suppose, but this area where they weren't really seen as proper Jews because they married people who weren't Jewish. They were seen as kind of this kind of mongrel race who weren't really true Jews, and the true Jews wouldn't go through there. And so Jesus was kind of going through there on his way up to Galilee. So he's there cutting through, and then he sees this woman. And as a rabbi, he certainly shouldn't be speaking to a woman, because the rabbis at the time, they were called the bleeding and the bruised rabbis. So when they saw a woman out, they'd look away, and then they'd walk into stuff and bang their heads, and they'd get all cuts and that kind of stuff. If they were living in these days, we call them the black-eyed rabbis. They'd probably have a rap, something like that, so they'd be all cooling on the street like the black-eyed peas and stuff. And so at that point, he shouldn't have even been speaking to a woman. So we've got this woman who's in an outcast land as an outcast person, because she's had 5 husbands. She's going to the well, there's no one around. So she's in a place where she really shouldn't be getting anywhere near God in terms of what the people would have thought at the time. Okay, the least likely person to see God in total. Overall, what we're going to see is we're going to just talk about how that's kind of how some of us have come to know God. Now that's really kind of my story. Now you might hear a lot of people, when I used to always think I grew up in a church, and people who stand at the front, you always think, oh, they've got it all, they know what they're doing, they don't mess up, they don't make any mistakes. It's all fine, we see Merle, we all know Merle's perfect. She don't make a mistake. We know that, obviously. Okay, but when I stand up here, my story is this kind of outcast person that I felt in my own church. It really was a battle between me and God, of trying to really come to know Him, and I didn't want to know, and then I felt rejected, and it was this whole kind of long journey, and we're going to just talk through some of that story here. So, the first thing that we're going to look at as we look at this is it's quite a confusing start. Okay, so this woman, she's talking to Jesus, he asks her for a drink, and then he says, oh, if you knew who I was, I'd give you a drink, and she thinks he means talking about literal water, so she don't get it. And so he starts explaining some stuff, and initially she's like, I don't understand, I just want to, oh right, where's this water, so I don't have to go and come back to the well. Okay, so she starts off from this place of confusion. Okay, so not quite getting it, and sometimes, personally, that's how I felt a lot of the time in church, where everybody's kind of going for it and really in a good place, and I'm kind of thinking, what if I'm not in a great place? And what if, all this stuff that people are saying is so exciting, why is my life tough? Why, if this kind of God that everybody talks about is so great, and He is, don't worry, if I was going to throw stuff at me, why is my life not necessarily all in order and not working necessarily? And this year particularly, 2012, particularly, me and Anna, who works at school, and she's not well at the moment, so she's not here. We left our church in Widnes, we moved to Warrington, we kind of pulled out of a house purchase, we just felt God was calling us here. And at the time, we were definitely convinced God was calling us here. We prayed a lot, we really felt a couple of things that had been said. There's a couple of things that said we can't really move if we don't have another car, because Warrington to Liverpool was quite a far commute, so we needed a car for me to make that commute. And then somebody gave us a car, and we were like, all right, God, we'll go. And so we went. And so we thought, this is going to be amazing. God's called us to Warrington. We're in Warrington. This is surely now going to be amazing. That's it. Job done. Easy. Okay. And what we found was actually for about 7 months, which is quite a long time, we looked at a couple of different churches, it didn't quite work. We kind of left the life group that I was involved in and the kind of 20s work that I was doing. It was quite a lonely time, it was quite a tough time, it was quite a tiring time. Warrington to Liverpool was a long commute, and it was, you just have to kind of extend your days. You have to go early to beat the traffic, or you have to sit in traffic for an hour and a quarter. And I just found like, God, why am I doing this? Like, it's costing me a fortune to get to and from work. It's not quite turned out as we thought it was going to be turned out. And I find often that, these people who find life, those annoying people who find life really easy. Like, when I did my driving lessons, and, those smug people say, of course, why didn't you pass your driving test first time? Because I wasn't very good, quite frankly. That's probably the main reason. I passed second time. The only reason I passed second time is that the day I can get a reverse around the corner, because I can't reverse around the corner still. Okay, and I blame my driving instructors, because I had two. One in Grimsby, where I grew up. And so the one I had in Grimsby when I grew up, it was almost every time it came to where it reversed around the corner, and he was a little bit, he was an odd cat, it's fair to say, and we used to pull up, and he'd be pulling up outside his ex-wife's house, and then he'd tell me how bad his ex-wife was, and I'd be like, oh, this has gone really weird, I just want to reverse around the corner, but because she lived on the corner, we always did that corner. I was like, can we not do that corner? Let's do a different corner, where there's no bitterness, just a corner of peace. And that didn't happen, so every time we did that, and so I failed my driving test there. I went to learn up in witness, and I went to learn with a woman, and there's nothing wrong with it. I don't know why I said she was a woman, she just was, and so that's fine. And so we were doing that, and we went to reverse around a corner, and I remember thinking, the first time we went to reverse around a corner, I went, finally someone's going to teach me this. And she, as we were about to do it, she said, we'll just take a little break here, because it was like a 2-hour lesson, and you get like a 5-minute break or whatever. And I was like, alright, we'll take a break before reversing around the corner. And she started telling me her ex-husband tried to kill her. And I was like, why? I was like, I realise this is deep, I realise this is upsetting, I realise this matters, but I really can't reverse around the corner. Like, if you can't help me, I'm going to fail again. And so eventually I got through it, I just kind of didn't get one on my test. And so I got away with it that way. But there were some people that you meet, I passed after half an hour behind the wheel when I was 10. Oh, right, did you now? Great. Well, I didn't. And some people tend to find that life's kind of, a bit easier, or seem to say that life's a bit easier. And often I found in churches when I was growing up as a teenager, a lot of people I couldn't relate to, because they're like, well, I'm a Christian and life should be great. And I was like, well, it's not really great. I'm a Christian at school and it's hard, because I don't fit in with all these guys. It's not easy. I'm trying to follow God, but I've got this anger in me because it's frustrating. Because I want to fit in, I want to be one of the lads, but I don't want to do what they're doing. And it's this constant battle between things. I couldn't relate to it. And as I started to read the Bible and realised that as Jesus talks to the woman at the well, and we look at the disciples, he doesn't go for the people who think they know it all and they've got it all together. And there's a clip that I'm going to show. It's about a 2-minute clip that we're going to show, which kind of illustrates, for me, what I used to think you had to be anywhere in the kingdom of God. I thought you had to kind of act like this. It goes on. The Apprentice. Who doesn't love The Apprentice? Me and my wife watch The Apprentice a lot because she's not well at the moment, so obviously she can't really do a lot, so we have to. She just lies down, she watches telly, and women don't have like rubbish telly. Don't Tell the Bride is about as good as it gets, and it goes all the way down to Sing Date, which is a date where some people sing to each other over a webcam. It's honestly the worst thing that my eyes have ever seen. So it's terrible. So we like The Apprentice, that's alright, I can live with that one. But I used to kind of think, I can't move on without saying, don't say the sky's the limit when there's footprints on the moon. Come on, that is not what and so at that point, there's this kind of thing where I thought, well, you've got to go for the best. If you're going to be a Christian, if you want to live like this, you've got to be as good as you can be. And so we see that Jesus doesn't go through some kind of apprentice style kind of thing when he picks his disciples. He just picks people, just like he goes to the woman at the well, and as we'll see, he tells her that he's the Messiah, but he doesn't tell a lot of the Jewish leaders at that point. He doesn't tell a lot of the educated people. He doesn't want to kind of stir up some controversy. But he tells this woman who's rejected by a lot of people, he tells this woman who's potentially seen as unclean, that kind of stuff. When he picks his disciples, he picks ordinary people, he just says, just come follow me. And that's his audition, just come follow me. And that's it. And they go on this journey, and they follow him, and they will see that even though they don't always know what they're doing, there's this woman at the well, she didn't get it when Jesus said. His disciples, they end up kind of arguing about who's the best. They'll go to the point where Peter will even as Jesus is about to go to the cross, Peter goes to cuts off a guy's ear. And Jesus must be like, do you not get it yet? 3 years. And they still don't get it. But the fact is, even though they don't get it, they know that in Jesus there's something that's a lot more worthwhile. So even though they're not 100% getting it, it's all about kind of knowing and trusting that God's there, even when it's confused. And I think as Christians, we have to go through this confusion often to get to the next step. The next step is where she gets this moment of truth, where he says, go get your husband. She says, I haven't got a husband. He says, no, you haven't. But you've had 5 husbands, and a man you live with, not your husband. She's blown away, because only God could know that. And so she knows, this is a prophet, this is a man of God. There's no other way that can do that. And I'm a logical man. I'm an accountancy lecturer, as I've said before. Now, that is my birthday cake from this year. You may see that. I've showed this to my class sometimes, just to prove that book that he's holding, IAS 11, that is the name of my favourite accounting standard. That's right. That's the kind of sad man I am. I don't have a favourite, I have a top 3. That's my favourite accounting standard. Normally when I show that in classes, just to prove my credibility as a lecturer, they always go, oh, you're only 30. Oh, shut up, guys. Tough life. So that's my favourite accounting standard. That doesn't come out very well, but this year for Christmas, I wrote her a book of international accounting standards, personalised to her. It's the saddest thing I've ever done in my life. It took me about 40 hours, and when she was listing all the presents with her mum, saying, oh, this is what you bought me, this is what you got me, she left that out. Unappreciated. 40 hours I spent just tailoring accounting standards to our love and our marriage, things like that. It's just so sad. I'll get rid of that. But I'm a logical man, okay? I'm an accountant, we kind of deal with facts and that kind of stuff. But there comes a point where, as we believe in God, as we follow God, we've got to be prepared that He's going to be outside of that box. He's going to be outside of logic, outside of what we can explain by miles. And that's what happens to this woman here. And as I kind of reflect on 2012, in a difficult year, even though we knew that we were supposed to come to Warrington, it hadn't quite worked out and stuff like that, we realised and started to see that God really started to put some stuff together as we kind of got lonely. God brought some people over that really felt that they wanted to come to lecture, like Lucas. We really trusted and really loved and really knew. And we really started to see God really putting something together. And actually, whilst we knew that God had brought us here for a reason, we had that 7-month period where it was unclear. We didn't know what was going on. That's not a short period. It wasn't like we prayed for like 2 days and then it was like, oh God, well, this is going to happen, obviously. And we're like, all right, 7 months it took. But through that confusion, we got to this moment of wonder. And what we'll see is, then we kind of got involved in the church. And like I said, in January, I kind of started helping again with the youth work now for about 6-7 years. I've been helping at youth work in Widnes, in a place called West Bank, and I've been running that. And it hadn't quite ended how I wanted it to end. We had real kind of big hopes that all these kids would know Jesus, and we really kind of prayed for it for years. We really spoke about Jesus to them for years and years and years and years, and it just never quite happened. And there were great times where we were in meetings and there was loads of them with us, and they really kind of responded to Jesus. And then there were times when we'd sit in a car park to pick them up for church and no one would be there. And it was really up and down. At the end, it didn't quite end quite as we wanted it to. And as I kind of thought about kind of coming back and helping out with this youth work, I just thought, part of me was just hold back, because I just thought, I'm afraid I don't want to fail this. I don't want to just fail it again. It's 6-7 years, it was too hard. I don't want to go through all that again for nothing really. And we were at this kind of conference, the YFC staff conference in January, and we were in this meeting, and I was just praying about, and it just comes to my mind, this youth work thing, and I was like, I don't want to do it, God. I do want to do it, but I can't do it. It's just too painful, it's too raw. And as I was praying, this guy was speaking, and everyone was just praying about various things, and I was just praying about doing this youth work. And as I was just praying about the new church and doing this youth work, and on a Thursday with Youth for You and this kind of stuff, as I did that, I just got this picture of this West Bank community that I started being with, whatever it was, 7 years, I think, at the time, 6 years, whatever it was, ago. And so, as it came into my mind, he just said, I just get the feeling somebody has just got a memory that's just come to them that was there from 7 years ago that they need to deal with. And I worked it out, and at that point it had been, I think it was 7, I can't remember what the exact phrase was. It was 7 years to the month that I'd started that kind of thing. And I was like, alright God, that's probably for me, innit? And so at that point I was like, fair enough. So I started praying with this guy, and he was just kind of there, and I got a couple of people to pray for me. And then we kind of moved on. I was like, and I just walked out and I was like, as a logical man, I can't explain it. Like, you know, there's no way for me, as a coincidence, that I just happened to be praying, and all of a sudden this place out of nowhere pops into my mind. And then this guy says, somebody needs to deal with a memory that's 7 years old, that's painful. And I was like, whoa. And so I had to go through this kind of period of confusion and really praying with God and really sitting there with God and really wrestling with that. And then he brought this kind of real moment of wonder, a real moment of truth out there. And it really kind of changed things. And as I thought, right, well, I'm going to do youth. God obviously wants us to do youth work here. He obviously wants us to be involved. He's made that as abundantly clear as he could. And that's what the woman at the well actually goes through, this period of not getting it, to this period of, well, wow, this guy's Jesus. And she gets the privilege of being told stuff that other people just haven't been told. And the final thing that we've got here is this thing about it being a wise choice. That you kind of look at it and think, well, this woman who's got a bad reputation. I was speaking to a guy who's worked at another church that I know, and he's kind of my resident theologian. So I asked him about different things. He's not necessarily the most orthodox theologian, because he described the woman at the well. He said, well, if she's had 5 divorces, and he said some of them she might have been widowed. He said if she's been married to 5 people, he said it's fair to say that she was maybe a bit disagreeable, a little bit crazy. He said, just imagine a drunk Scouswoman, which is a bit controversial. And I was like, I don't expect that from a theologian, he said, but he said, just imagine, a real kind of screeching, shouting person. He said, that's what I picture the woman at the well. I was like, fair enough. And so at this point you think, that's not who you pick as an evangelist. Some woman who maybe in her town's not got the greatest level of standing. And I think often we kind of think, and I remember certainly when I was growing up, I was just like, I just want a footballer to be a Christian, because then it's cool, because if a footballer's a Christian, I can go into school and say I'm a Christian and it's alright. It's cool because that footballer's a Christian. And do you know what? There's nothing wrong with that in terms of footballers being Christians is a good thing. What we can't do is pin our hopes on that and think, oh, these famous people that are up there in the eyes of the world, if they believe in Jesus, then it will all be alright. And Jesus picks the people in the middle of just unknown situations, and he uses them to go and tell the message. He doesn't send his disciples out. The disciples have gone to get food, but it doesn't say anything about them telling them about Jesus. It's the woman at the well that goes and tells them about Jesus. And they actually then come to Jesus, and they hear because of this woman's story, because of what she says, because the truth that Jesus has put in her, the truth of what the message of Jesus is, outweighs her reputation. Whatever's gone before, the stuff that Jesus has said carries such an authority and such a weight that actually her reputation, her past, it doesn't matter. Okay, people want to come and they want to hear this stuff about Jesus. And what we see is that God puts his hope in some really strange places. As I said before, I stand up here as a guy who wrestled for years and years and years. I didn't really want to go to church, and so it was only with the fact that I just got to the point where I just couldn't argue that God was real and he loved me. And this guy, when I was 15, no matter what, he just kind of broke me down to the point where I just couldn't argue that there was a God out there, because no matter what I did, I couldn't shake him, I couldn't wind him up. And there was this was one time when, I shared this with you a few weeks ago, but there was one time when he used to kind of run this little kind of lads group on a Sunday morning for about 5 of us. So he just sat with us for a couple of hours, and we just chat through the Bible, we talked to him, we have some food. It was great, and it meant a lot to me, because this was a guy who didn't hate me in church. That was rare at my church. My church were alright, they're nice people, but because I was a bit loud and a bit mouthy and played football and I broke a couple of windows, I wasn't popular. Breaking windows don't go down well in the church, from what I gather. And so at that stage, he was there, and he'd obviously kind of came in quite new, and they'd flown him over from America to run this oil refinery, and so he was really high up, like really important, second in charge of the whole of all the European oil refineries. And then one day there was a massive fire, a massive explosion in his oil refinery. It was on the BBC News, it was like the lead story. It was at like 2-3 in the morning on a Saturday night, Sunday morning. So he'd gone out there to try and deal with everything, see what was going on, because he's in charge of this whole thing. And it gets to about 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning. And I didn't know this till about 3-4 months afterwards. But at 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning, he just goes, you know what, I need to leave, because I deal with these five groups of lads on a Sunday morning. I just need to go and spend 2 hours with them. I'll come back straight after that. You can have me all day, but you're not having that time. And they said, well, you'll lose your job probably. And he was like, I don't care. And he didn't come in and say, guess what, guys, I've put my job on the line for you. He just came in and ran it. We didn't know. And then months later, somebody said, you know what Ron did? We found this out. And this guy, who I just thought, he was just dead patient. I thought, why? Why would he just risk his whole kind of job and career to come and sit with just 5 guys? And he did it because he was convinced that Jesus had told him that that's what he should do. He was convinced that he'd been sent to England not just to run an oil refinery, but to tell people about Jesus. Okay, so Jesus is here, he's put his reputation on the line all the time. He puts his reputation on the line to deal with sinners, to deal with people who are broken. The people look at him, think you shouldn't deal with people like that. And that's the beauty of Jesus. As we look at our lives, Jesus gets involved in just the dirtiest things. We don't have to kind of say, you know, God, like The Apprentice, choose us because we're all this. God knows our hearts. He knows the dirt of our hearts. He knows the filth. And he still says, you know what, I long to call you people, this mess of a people. He longs to call us his people. And so as we just kind of wrap up and we think about just kind of finishing things, as I was prepping this, there's just a couple of groups of people I really thought, as I was really planning this, I just thought there was a couple of people that were just maybe tired of the act, just thinking I've tried to just be the best and show everybody that I'm okay. I'm just tired, it's not working. And I've got a feeling that there was a couple of people that maybe just, whatever it was in your past, that somebody had abandoned you and said you were worthless. And I just got a feeling that God was saying, like, you don't have to put on an act anymore. You certainly don't have to feel that you were abandoned. That pain that is there is very real. I'm not discounting that. But God is saying that He has not kind of written you off, that He's not finished with you, no matter what's in that past. That there is a hope there is a future. And what He would say is that He doesn't want us to just keep going back to the well. He doesn't want us to just keep going back and saying, well, I'm just going to do the same thing that I've always done. And maybe it will get better one day. I remember when I was at uni in Nottingham, there was this chicken shack on the edge of our road, and we went there all the time. We went to the kebab shop. We went to the chicken shop when the kebab shop was full or when it was closed. And every single time I got chicken from that place, I was sick. Every single time. But there's sometimes you walk past it, you smell the chicken, you think, it'll be alright this time. It'll be alright this time. You go in, you're sick again, you're like, I'm never going to learn. I'm never going to learn. The only way I learn is I moved. And so at that point, that's all I do. So I think what God's saying is just don't go and do the same stuff and the same stuff and you think, oh well, maybe this time if I just try a bit harder and if I just try and be the kind of best husband, dad, son, student, all those things are good. But God said that's not it. That's not what your life is about. It's not about just trying to work as hard as you can be to be the best you can be. But actually having that place where you just stop and say, do you know what? The living water comes from Jesus. It doesn't come from our works. It doesn't come from our actions. It comes from Jesus. And there's no substitute for stopping. There's no substitute for spending that time with Him. Okay, and if that was you, that just keeps going back to that well, I would just say, just take a chance, just stop and just say, do you know what, God, if you're real, my life is confusing, it's tough. I just pray that you would give me just something that shows me you're interested or something that shows me you care. And you know what, it might not come instantly, but my experience is that as we really wrestle these things, as we trust God, that He will always come through, that He will always be faithful. It doesn't mean it always works out exactly the way we would choose, but He would not just abandon us, He would not let us down. Okay, so am I finishing today? The band are finishing, apparently. So the band are going to come back up and do another song. Gary shot at that. But that's fine. Steve told me that you were doing that, Gary, just now, so maybe I'm wrong. Gary, it's coming up. Okay, good. So I'll just pray as the band come up and then I'll hand over. Yes, so God, we thank you for that love that does not look at our past, that does not write us off, that is not finished with us, that is not fed up with us. But Lord, we thank you that, your love just never fails, Lord. And we thank you that living water... I don't think anyone knows, it's just it's fine. God, we thank you that living water is found in you and in you alone. So God, I just pray that, for those of us who are just so used to trying to working our way out of trouble, would you help us to stop? Would you help us to trust you and just hand over control of our lives to you again? Let's pray that in the name of Jesus. Amen.